Well, good morning. Nice to have you with us today. As Pastor Jason said earlier, a lot of our folks are up at a church camp out this weekend, over 200 people up there, so that's why it's a little bit more sparse today. But we're still here, and we're still in the midst of this series that we've said is a series, little byline behind Sticks and Stones, is a series for those who are tired of losing the same battles over and over and over. And whether you come from sort of a religious background or whether you're just popped in today to give this whole church thing one more shot, or you're here with somebody not really sure about all this, every one of us has a battle that we're probably tired of battling over and over again and tired of losing over and over again. And here's kind of where we're going to start off today. We all need a hero. Isn't that true? All of us need a hero. Whether it's that hero of, Superman or Batman, these people with superhuman powers, whether it's a more normal one like Chuck Norris or Shaft or Gilligan from Gilligan's Island, or whether it's your one of your parents, your mom and what she has done for all these years, or your dad. All of us need a hero, right? And there's a reason we need a hero. It's because we all need hope. It's something that's built into the very fabric of our lives. That's a part of us. We want to have hope. Hope that there's more, hope that this is going to get fixed, hope that what's kind of going crazy now will get kind of steady. But here's the truth of the matter. We all have a giant. And I want you to sit for a moment and just think of what that is for you. Because all of us have one. One of those scary things. One of those big things. And maybe it's something that was started off small, but over time has grown bigger and bigger and bigger. And here's the reality of it. There's a reason we're afraid of giants. And you are afraid of your giant like I'm just afraid of my giant. And there's lots of reasons, but here's some of the reasons. They're big, right? And your giant is big. It may not seem big to somebody else, but for you, it is huge. They're also bad, right? They're big and they're bad. That's why we're kind of afraid of them. And it's not a fair fight. Because in a lot of ways, we have fought that battle, and it seems like it gets less fair and less fair every time. I'm just saying, why me? How come this is happening to me? But like I said when we started, we all need a hero. And there's a reason we call them heroes. Heroes are bolder, right? They're bolder and they're braver. And they give us hope. And today we're going to look at one of those great heroes from the Bible. It's a story, if you've been around a church at all much of your life, you've heard this story. The story of David and the good versus the hero and the bad guy, right? The big, bad, unfair guy. So before we jump into that story, I'm going to invite you just to bow our heads and let's pray one more time together today, all right? Father, we sit here this morning reminded again that you know everything about us. You know the people that have been heroes in our lives, the people that we thank you for sending in and through our lives. And whether it's been a real person or even a made-up person, a fictional person that just has given us hope at times. We just take this moment to thank you for them, for the blessing, for the encouragement, for the flicker of hope they give to life. But you also know all of us have these giants that lurk in our lives. And sometimes they just pop out occasionally. For others of us, it's a regular, constant, daily battle. Every day it seems like we get taunted and pushed down by them. And God, my only prayer this morning is simply that you would speak to us. That you speak into our lives. That you draw our eyes away from us and even draw our eyes away from our giants and to draw them to you. That today, again, we would not only be reminded, we would be assured that you are our hero. That you can face the giants. And you can put them down. So I just ask you to do that for us today. to remind us and assure us of those two things. In your name, amen. If you have a Bible and you want to follow along, it's over in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Actually, the whole chapter is on this great story of David and Goliath. And it begins this way. The Philistines gathered their armies for battle. And as soon as you hear that, if this was a movie, that music would start playing, right? Kind of that low bass that would start to build up. The battle gets lying. And it says, Saul and the Israelites gathered in the valley of Elah and camped there and took their position, drew up their battle lines to fight the Philistines. The story, in fact, says this: on one side of the valley, on the, kind of the hill, on this side, the Philistines. On this side is Saul, and the Israelites are over here. And I'm guessing most of us in this room have probably never been to the valley of Elah, but all of us have been there. We've all been in that moment where we faced our giants and we've looked at them. And it says, the Philistines had a champion fighter from Gath named Goliath. And he was 9 feet, 4 inches tall. How many of you ever been around a 7-foot tall person? A couple of us, yeah. I've been a basketball fan my whole life and had occasion at basketball games when I see a 7-footer to go stand to see how amazingly tall they are. But actually when years ago I helped as a high school basketball coach, and one of the teams we were going to play was this team coming from Utah that had this guy named Sean Bradley. Anybody ever remember Sean Bradley? A few of you do. He was a 7-foot, like 6 or 7 foot tall, and he was that high and tall in high school. And so as we were preparing the team to talk about how we're going to defend this guy, the best thing I do was bring out a chair, and for me to stand on the chair. I'm not going any higher, because this is about 7 feet, close to 7 feet 6. And you can imagine another couple feet on top of that. Just to give our team an idea of what it was like to stand in the presence of somebody 7.5 feet tall. And it's impressive when you stand next to that person, because it's like there's nothing. And our team, our tallest kids, we had like 2 kids that were over 6 feet on the whole team. And here comes in Sean, this 7'6", and he was a great athlete in high school. Wasn't so great in the pros, but high school he was unbelievable. And this told in the story just to remind us how big and bad this giant was. 9 feet, 4 inches tall. And then the story goes on and tells us adds some details. He came out of the Philistine camp with his bronze helmet on his head, a coat of bronze mail that weighed 125 pounds. He had a person hanging on his body from this weight, right? To tell us again how big and bad this guy was, right? He's not only tall, but he's carrying a person around with him just to protect himself. And it goes on. He wore these bronze protectors on his legs. He had a bronze spear across his shoulders just to make him look even tougher. And the wooden part of his larger spear, had the spear as well, was like a weaver's rod, and its head weighed 15 pounds. Now, it tells us that because can you imagine, I don't know if you know how much 15 pounds, but put out your hand like this and feel the weight of 15 pounds is about that much weight, okay? Not enough to go like that, but about that much, right? And if we had a spear with a 15-pound head, you know what it would do if we threw it? Flump, right? Because 15 pounds is enough that you try to throw it, it's going to go in the ground. I don't care how hard you try to throw it, it's going to go down pretty quick, right? And the picture is, again, that this guy is big and he is bad. An officer carries his shield in front of him, walks in front of him. He has to have help with that, apparently. You know, he's got all this other stuff on. But he comes out, and he's got to be this impressive thing. He's got this shorter guy carrying this big shield. And you have to imagine for a 9-foot, 5-inch tall guy, you know, a shield's got to be pretty good size, right? So the other guy just looks like a shield walking, right? And behind him comes this big, bad dude with the spears and the person hanging on him, you know, kind of male, and he looks tough. And it says that Goliath stood and shouted to the Israel armies, "Why have you taken positions for battle? Why are you guys all lined up? Why do we have to be out? Here, we're going to make this simple. Choose a man and send him to fight me. We're going to settle this. We're going to make this easy. So not everybody has to die. If he can fight and kill me, we will be your slaves. But if I can kill him, you will be our slaves in service." And it's kind of a very smart strategic move on this, isn't it? You send out your biggest and baddest warrior. 9 feet, whatever of him, right? This huge guy. And he gets in your face and he says, "We're going to make this easy. You pick your best guy, mano a mano, we're going to go at it. Whoever wins, everybody else will follow in suit. You know, your guy wins, we're going to be your servants, your slaves. You win this way." Not everybody has to die today because, by the way, you're all going to die if we don't do it this way. So we're going to make this easy, right? Then he says, today, I stand and dare, and you remember as a kid, I don't know if girls do this, but boys do this all the time. I dare you, right? I double dare you, double dog dare you was how they said it back in the day. I don't know what they do today, but still they do stupid stuff because I had two boys growing up. You know, I raised them, and I know that they still do this whole dare thing. I bet you can't do that. Oh yeah, you know, and this whole thing. And so he dares them. He defies them, challenges the army of God. Give me a man to fight. And that's his message. Give me somebody. Let's go at this. Let's get this done. And when Saul and the Israelites heard the Philistines' army, they were very scared. They were dismayed and terrified. And don't you love this historian who's writing this stuff down? Giving such an honest account. And it's so often we see in history books, you read some stories of these things, you know, and somebody's a little afraid, but I stood up, I was courageous. Here's the whole army, here's the king. This is the guy that had been known as the biggest and baddest in Israel. And his whole group of men, and they're all shaking in their boots. Because this dude is big, this dude is bad. And it says for 40 days, this Philistine comes out every morning and evening. So 80 times over the course of 40 days, he comes out and stands before the Israelite army. And he does this whole thing. Send me somebody to fight. You. Not you running away, the other guy next to you, right? You. Send me somebody so we can take care of business. We can get this all done. We've been out here 20 days now, 24 days, 30 days, 40 days. This kind of goes on. And every day they come out and they're afraid. And then the backstory flips in. And the author tells us that Jesse, who's David's father, has a son David. And he tells his son, hey, take this half bushel of roasted grain and 10 loaves of bread to your brothers in the camp. And also take 10 pieces of cheese to the commander. He says, you know, hey son, come here. Take this stuff, take it to your brothers. Take some cheese for the commander so he'll treat them a little nice, and go out there. See how your brothers are, and bring some news, some assurance to show me that they're all right. And this kind of makes sense. If you're a parent and you have a child serving in the military right now, you kind of wonder how things are going, right? Back then they didn't have Skype, didn't have email. They had to send their son, right, to go find out. Give me some news and come back and tell me how things are going. Just let me know things are going. And so it says when David arrives at the camp, he apparently arrives either in the morning or in the evening, we don't know which one. The army was going out to their battle position, shouting their war cry, which you got to love, right? For 40 days they have quaked in their boots. For 40 days they've gone out, been tough, till they get out and see the giant. Then nobody really is that tough, Everybody kind of keeps moving back in the line to make sure somebody's closer to him, But they shout a cry before they go out. Hey, today's the day. Guys do all this. Who's going to win? Let's give the big rally cry, coach. Today's the day. We're going to face the giant. So David leaves the food with the man who kept the supplies, and he runs the battle line to be with his brothers because he's a kid. And kids are curious, right? Anybody where the action's at? And you can probably imagine this whole cry, and he runs out. Ooh, this is exciting for a little boy. So he drops in there and he runs out with them, and he's kind of checking out what's going on. And while he goes out and he's talking to them, Goliath, his brothers, the Philistine champion from Gath came out. So again, Goliath shows up on the scene. And he shouts things against Israel as usual, and David heard him. And when the Israelites saw Goliath, they were very much afraid, and they fled. At what point are you embarrassed as a soldier in this whole thing, 40 days. Morning and night, you've gone out, you've rallied, cried, you got everybody pumped up, put on your face paint, and you're ready to go, and you get out there, and every time he shows up, you run away. And David watches this. He's a little boy, he's excited about the army, and he's heard all about the army from his brothers and proud of them, and everybody runs away. And they begin to talk among themselves as they've sort of fled, give themselves distance. Have you seen this man? He's tall, He's big. And he's scary. And he keeps coming out to defy Israel. And then begin to say, the king has gotten so desperate that he'll give a great reward to whoever kills him. So apparently over this 40 days, the plans have been kind of going up. Who wants to face him? Okay, let's not bump up the odds anyway. Let's see if we give this. Would somebody want to face him? How about this? He kind of goes, finally gets up to say, they're giving the king will not only give great rewards, he'll let you, whoever kills him, marry his daughter. He's going to let you become part of the royal family. And his father's family will not have to pay taxes in Israel. This is a huge thing. I mean, this is like huge freedom for them and a change of their whole life and their life to come. And David hears all this, and so he asks the men who stood near him about it and gets a little clarity. And then he says this statement: "Who does this uncircumcised Philistine think he is?" You got to imagine, David's a boy, and we don't know how old he is in this story. He doesn't tell us. It just says he's a boy. And since in Jewish culture you become a man at age 12, I have to imagine a boy is 12 or younger. That's just a guess at it. But here he is. Who's that Philistine think he is, you know? He's this little dude, right? And he begins to talk some smack. He says, does he think he can speak against? Can he taunt, defy, challenge the armies of the living God? And they're all looking at the kid going, yeah. You know, we've been doing this for 40 days, right? We keep running away. And he keeps going on. You know, when David's older brother, Elam, hears David talking with the soldiers, he was angry with David. You got to love this about the Bible. Because this is the part, I mean, if you've never read it, I encourage you to read it or, spend some time. I told you last week, you don't have to believe the Bible to read the Bible. Some of you say, well, I don't really believe this whole Christianity thing, so why would I read it? You read lots of stuff you don't believe. You read stuff and decide later if you believe it, right? So this is great. This tells you how honest the Bible is. The Bible says, here's David. This is David's pinnacle story. This is the height of his heroism. This is the start of it all, the where he makes his name for himself. And who in that story would say that his brother comes along and looks at his little brother and says, you knucklehead? And that's what he says. He gets angry with David. And here's what he says to him. Why did you come out here? Who's taking care of those few sheep of yours in the desert? You got responsibilities, David. You need to get home. Quit hanging around here. You brought the food. Go tell Dad we're fine. Leave, I know you are proud and deceitful, David. You came down here just to watch the battle. Which probably was partially true. He was probably glad to go. Get away from the sheep for a few days because sheep are real exciting to watch, A chance to go see some live action and hears these stories about this giant and goes down, he's on the front line and everybody runs, he kind of gets swept up and runs too, and then he decides, hey, who's this guy think he is? And he's all talking tough because he hasn't been out there all 40 days and 40 nights. And his brother says, you knucklehead, knock it off and go home. To which David says, the brave David says, now what have I done wrong? Can I even talk? Can I even ask questions? I mean, this is not the words of a powerful man, right? This is a kid and his older brother having this argument that everybody's seen. But what David has said to Saul, was told to Saul, and he sends for David. So his word when he's kind of standing up thinking, who is this, this uncircumcised Philistine I think he is? Who is he to defy the armies of the living God? He goes on and on. He's talking all proud. I guess he must have been the only one talking proud because they drag him in to see Saul. Which tells you how bad the situation's got, right? There ain't a man among them who wants to say anything bad. They just say, dude, did you see that guy? He's scary. He's tough. We've heard of his story, but it's nothing like being up close and personal with him. He blocks out the sun. He's huge. But David talks to stuff, so they bring him in to talk to Saul. And David says to Saul, now imagine again, here's this little kid. Don't let anyone be discouraged, Don't lose heart. Your servant, will go and fight the Philistine, And you got to imagine what king at this point wouldn't go, thanks, son, but go home, right? Nobody lets him keep going, right? Saul answers him and says, listen, you can't go out against the Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy. And Goliath, he's been a warrior since he was a young man. He's a bad dude. And it would be foolish for me to stick a boy. I mean, things are already bad enough. We go out every day. We're going to go fight, face paint. Time to go out battle. Whoa, And now we're going to let a boy go out and do this? A boy go do a man's job, a big man's job, a bad man's job, when none of us want to do it? And here's what David says. And I love this line. David says to Saul, I, your servant, have been keeping my father's sheep, which is a real, boost of confidence for Saul, right? Thanks, son. Sheep are vicious wild animals. You got to really work hard, But then David goes on. When a lion or bear came and took a sheep from the flock, I would chase it. I would attack it and rescue the sheep out of its mouth. If it turned on me, I caught it by its fur and I hit it and killed it. I, your servant, have killed both a lion and a bear. I'm a tough kid. Saul, you know? And it's amazing. Here's what Saul says to David. Go, and may the Lord be with you, because, right? I mean, this is one of those pictures you get that, and I love this story because it's so open and honest. I mean, and it's so crazy how this works out. It tells you how desperate the situation was. That somebody had to go out and face him. And nobody would. Until this kid shows up. This big talking kid whose older brother thinks he's just an irritant. Who talks to the king. Who tells him he's this great shepherd. He takes care of those sheep. He kind of has to deal with a lion or a bear, and he's killed them all, and let's send him out. May God be with you, you know? You ever have one of those moments? Either for yourself or when somebody else goes, and you just go, well, God be with you, you know? Checking it off. It's already a loss in the column. We wrote it in ink because it's not going to happen, but hey, God be with you, you know? Good for you, kind of thing. So David goes out, and before they, in the midst of this, Saul says, hey, try on my armor. David puts it on, and he's a little guy again, and he's got this huge piece of armor. He got the little head that sticks out the armor, and it's like, this is not going to work. This is not going to fit. This is not a good thing. I'll do it on my own. And so he takes his staff, this wood stick, and if it's a nice one, it's got a curve in it to help keep the sheep all in line, perfect in line, a little stick to fight things off. And he chooses 5 smooth stones from a stream, puts them in a shepherd's bag, and he grabs his sling. A stick, a sling, and 5 rocks, 5 little stones in his pocket. And he walks towards the Philistine. And if you've been around a church, you know where this story is going, right? But we still love the story. It's still a story that we get engaged in because it's one of those stories that you can just hear over. You could watch over and over if it was a movie. Because even though how it's going to end, it's just that you get sucked in the story of how crazy it is, how foolish it is. And at the same time, as David struts out, towards this huge guy, the Philistine was approaching David with the shield bearer in front of him, And again, the shield bearer's got this huge thing kind of looking around, kind of keeping his angle going. And they begin to walk towards each other. And Goliath looks at David and saw that he was only a boy, tanned and handsome, which I don't have an understanding why that's thrown in there. I'm not looking at somebody, I'm not going, hey, this guy looks, he's got a good tan. By the way, he's a kid, but good-looking kid. I don't know why it's in there, honestly. But he makes that note. But he also makes a note that he's a boy. And this boy's been playing outside a lot because he's tanned, and he looks down with David with contempt, which makes a lot of sense, right? It makes perfect sense for Goliath, this big, bad dude who this is not going to be a fair fight to go, really? After 40 days? This is what you send me? I mean, at least get me somebody, Somebody that looks like they can do something here. And he says to David, do you think I'm a dog that you come at me with a stick, Gonna hit me off, say bad dog kind of thing? Is that really what you're going to do, kid? And he says he uses his God's names to curse David, which thankfully the Bible doesn't put all those words in there, but you have to imagine that it's probably pretty rich at this moment. Because how offended would you be if at your job on Monday morning, your boss brought in a 10-year-old kid and said, by the way, listen to what the kid says today. He's got a great idea and we're doing what he says. Right? You'd go, I'm out of here, right? Or what's going on with that? I mean, this is crazy. And this guy's like, really? This is what you send to me? You blankety blanks and you bunch of blank. He just goes off on it, right? Cursing him with his gods, my God, all that. And he says, David, all right, kid, come here. Here's how it's going to work. I'm going to give your flesh to the birds of the air and the wild animals, which apparently was really tough talk back in those days, To which David says, you come to me using a sword and a spear and a javelin. You got it all, man. You got it all going on. But I come to you in the name of the Lord all-powerful, the God of the armies of Israel. And David has this great point. He's not coming because I'm so tough, I've taken out everybody. He's coming because of God's glory and God's glory only. And he somehow believes that God is greater than all the stuff that Goliath's got. this big, huge spear that when he throws it, it actually goes farther than a couple of feet. This huge sword. And he says to him, you've spoken against, you've defied and challenged him. This isn't about you and an army, this is about you and him, and you've challenged him now, and so because you've challenged him, and the odds aren't fair, this is not a fair fight, and you think it's not fair this way, but in reality it's not fair this way, today the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'm going to strike you down and cut off your head. And you can only imagine what's going through Goliath's mind at this moment, right? I got to give the kid some props that he's got some guts, got a little toughness to him, but really, this is, And today, I'll feed the bodies of the Philistines, so not just me, but I'm going to feed all of your bodies to the birds of the air and the wild animals. If you want to talk about me, I'm going to talk about you the same way, and then all the world will know that there is a God in Israel. Everyone gathered here will know that the Lord does not need swords, and he doesn't need spears to save, to rescue, to deliver people. That God doesn't need the stuff that we think we need. The battle belongs to him, and he will hand you over to us. He will hand you over to us, right? To which is too much for Goliath. He's heard enough. He has taunted these people for 40 days again now, every day, morning and night. Every day, come on, send me a man, send me a man, send me a man, send me a man. I mean, at some point, probably about day 27, he gets slows down a little bit. Maybe he picks up a little pace again. Come on, and now you send me this? And this kid's going to talk smack to me? And this is the moment that normally when we hear this story about David, we would talk about it. As a preacher, I would talk about things, you need to be like David. You need to step up to the plate. You need to step up and face that giant in your life. Or I would say something like, you need to face your fear, because you need to face your fear, right? Yeah, come on, stay with me here, right? We all need to step up, true? We all need to face our fear, right? We all need to move forward instead of moving back, right? And we would also always say something like, it's time to face your giant, and today is the day to face your giant, right? Because that's what the story is about. It's about facing our giants, about being the little kid who has no hope to overcome this, and we get to overcome it. But here's the big twist that maybe you haven't considered, but it's right there in the story. And you aren't. And even better news, so often we think it's about us getting up enough courage to face our giants. But what if it's not about us being David? What about it's us being the army? At times we get ourselves pumped up, face the fight. We're going to get out there and do it today, and then life kind of has a way of pushing us back, wearing us down, appearing bigger and bigger and badder, and not looking like it's very fair. The reality is Jesus has come into your story, just like David came into that scene and said, you guys, you can't or won't, but I will. See, this story is not so much about us having to be like David. It's a great picture towards what Jesus would become for all of us. When the devil, when our giants, when our enemy every day taunts us over and over again, and we get in that battle line, we want to face that battle, but it just seems so overwhelming. The call isn't for us to step up and face up. It's really about looking up. Keep that in mind as we go on the story. As Goliath comes closer to attack him, David ran quickly to meet him. So Goliath starts to kind of lumber towards him, and David takes off on a run, right? He takes a stone from his bag, puts it in his sling, and he slung it. And the stone hits the Philistine. It goes deep into his forehead. And Goliath falls to the ground. It's that dramatic music you'd hear playing, right? And all of a sudden, boom, when we hit it, it just kind of stops. Let's just soak in for a moment. The scene of what's just happened. A little kid has taken down the giant. when we couldn't or wouldn't, he does. And there's a reaction to this. David runs, stands over him. He takes Goliath's sword out of its holder, and again, you got to imagine for a 9-foot-something dude, that sword's got to be like 2 times David's height, right? I mean, it's got to be huge. Somehow he gets that thing out. Imagine if he just gets it up, all he's got to do is relax his muscles, and it's going to come down, and he chops off his head. Everybody go, ooh. It's kind of one of those moments, ooh moments, right? I mean, it's like, ooh, let's have the G version this morning, Mike. Let's not have the, But it's in there, right? I mean, it's the reality. And it's what David had to do to seal the deal. The stone put his guy down. But to show everybody that this was the end of him, he had to somehow pull out that sword, somehow get it up and let it drop, and somehow get this big head, because it had to be a size, like a pumpkin size, right? To get this big head up. He couldn't hold it up like this, he kind of got it, and looking around, and when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran now. Because if a little boy can do that, and he's an Israelite, what can the big guys do, right? And of course now the Israelites, having hope now, the hope that's established not because they were the courageous ones, because David was, they shout. I don't know what they shouted. Woohoo, or hallelujah, or just started roaring like, whoa, victory, Capitals game, one kind of, And they chased the Philistines all the way to the entrance of the city of Gath and to the gates of Ekron, which doesn't matter to us. It's a long ways, and they chased them all down. And they didn't just chase them down, they were killing them as they go on, the story tells us. And they slaughtered these guys. And here's the truth. The truth in that story is that Goliath must fall, and Goliath will fall. And that's the important thing for us today. Is know that your Goliath, and your Goliath, and your Goliath, and my Goliath, not only must he fall, he will fall. Not because we get to be David, not because we're going to get courageous and finally face him down, but because Jesus has faced him down. Jesus who comes as this little baby. Jesus who takes on that role to do something we either won't or can't do, rises up because of God's glory. And faces him down. And Jesus has opened the way. And here's the question for us. Because the way, according to the Bible, has been opened for us. The enemy has been vanquished. I love how Revelation chapter 12 puts it. John, in this vision of kind of what's going on in heaven, he says, then I heard this loud voice shouting across the heavens. And the shout is, It has happened, and it has to just reverberate. It has happened. Past tense, not is happening, not will happen. It has. Everybody say has. Has happened. And at last, what is it? The salvation, which is the saving of us, and the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Christ. That has happened. And he goes on and says, listen, for the accuser, our giant, our Goliath, has been thrown down to earth, the one who accused, and actually in the original language says accuses, keeps confusing our brothers and sisters before our God day and night. That just like 40 days that Goliath went out, and in the morning and the evening said, blah, 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 send me out a guy, blah, 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 blah. Our huge Goliath, our accuser stands before God more than 40 days, accusing us. In Revelation, this picture that John Gass says, listen, this has happened, that he's been thrown down, and they, talking about God's people, have defeated him, past tense, because of two things, because of the blood of the Lamb, and because of their testimony. Let's talk about that in just a moment. The blood of the Lamb, the sacrifice, the death of one being that covers everybody. That they've overcome through the blood of what Jesus has done for them and their testimony. And the testimony here, what it literally means is simply the story of our lives. The story of how Jesus has come into your life, how Jesus has worked in your life, how Jesus has changed your life. The overcoming has happened because of what Jesus has done and what he has done to us. And that last line is not a throwaway line. It's a very important line when he says, and they were not afraid to die. Because sometimes we think that overcoming means nothing bad's going to happen. Sometimes we think overcoming means we're never going to get sick, never going to get hurt, never going to die. And John will tell us that that's not the point of overcoming. The point of overcoming is bigger than just this enemy we call death. It's bigger and grander than all that. It is about what has been established through what Jesus has done and what that establishment can mean for you and can mean for me. See, your giant is dead, and it is not by your hand. And we need to remind ourselves that it's not by my might, not by the stuff I can come up with, not by any kind of strength I can throw to the table. It has come through Jesus. And the one, as John would say in 1 John, the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. The one who is in me, say that, in me, is greater than the one who is in the world. That is a fact. That is a story. That is a line. That is a reality that over and over and over throughout the New Testament, the writers, under the inspiration of God, keep trying to tell us that God, who is now in you, really is greater. He's greater than those giants, whatever those giant forms take in your life. He's greater than those obstacles, whatever they are. And again, it's not about I'm never going to have anything bad in my life. It's about not letting those things prevent us from experiencing the good and giving honor to Him. Jesus has opened the way. And so here's my conclusion today. Will you? Number one, will we see it? Will we really see it? That this is what God has done for us. And secondly, will we believe it? Because not only is it required to see it, we have to believe it as well, right? But more than even seeing it and believing it is, will we follow it? And that is an option that God gives us today, and He gives us every day of our life. Will we today say, yes, God. Yes, I believe that you can overcome any Goliath in my life, and that my job then is just simply to follow, just like the Israelite army did. Shaked in their boots, couldn't do anything, but when the way was open, they responded and went through. Here's a great quote. Sometimes your head has to tell your heart what is true. Because our hearts at times tell us lots of stuff. And sometimes in our heads, what is true, what we've read, what we know has been said, we have to tell our heart, you know what? We may not feel like it today, but it is true. That Jesus has made a way. And He hasn't just made a way out there, He has made a way in your life, and in your life, and in my life. So the question isn't about can a way be made, it's about will I respond to the way that's already been made. Just like for the Israelite army, it wasn't about are we going to face this guy? No, because he's way too big and way too bad and he's just too much for us to deal with, and it's not a fair fight to, look what this little kid did. Look what he's done. And now look what we can do in following him. With that said, I want to give you just a chance to respond today. Every week we do this thing called Next Steps. And today, maybe your next step is simply to claim Jesus as your David. Maybe that's it. To see Jesus as David, not yourself as it. Maybe your next step today is to take a courageous step of faith by believing in what Jesus has done. Maybe that's the big, big step for you today. To really believe that what He has done has really been done. Maybe your next step today is to allow your head to tell your heart what is true. To allow your brain matter to overcome your heart in this matter. But whatever it is, I hope you'll take some kind of next step today. And just a few moments, we're going to have a chance to give back to God. 3 ways you can give. You can do it in person today. You can do it by mail. You can do it online. And again, thank you for supporting. If you're a guest today, we don't expect you to give anything. When the little basket comes by, just place that Connect card in there. That'll be your offering for us today, all right? This is just for those that consider New Hope their church home. And for those of you online, if you want to go online to give, we thank you for that. For those of you here that regularly give, we thank you for that as well. What your money does allow us to do ministry in a lot of different forms, a lot of different ways.